Good day, my dear learners. Welcome to our discussion for the introduction to the philosophy of the human person. I am your teacher, Mr. Kelly Thomas B. Tadena from Maslog National High School DepEd Division of Danao City. You can contact me at kellythomas.tadena@deped.gov.ph. For the content standard, the learners demonstrates various ways of doing philosophy. For the performance standard, the learner evaluate opinions. And for our learning competencies, first, distinguish opinion from truth. Second, analyze situations that show the difference between opinion and truth. Third, realize that the methods of philosophy lead to wisdom and truth. And lastly, evaluate opinions. In the previous chapter, we learned about the meaning and the process of doing philosophy. We also learned how to distinguish between personal and philosophical questions. Most importantly, we were encouraged to ask philosophical questions. When we start to raise such questions, we ultimately want to arrive at the truth. Nowadays, it is more and more difficult to discern what is true from what is false. It seems that everybody can claim to hold the truth. Philosophy, as a discipline, will not claim to be the sole bearer of truth. It is not so much the truth that concerns philosophy, but rather the way or process by which we can distinguish claims that are true from those that are false. There is much more disagreement rather than agreement among philosophers with regard to the question of truth. Nevertheless, there is one thing that most of them agree on. The truth is not a simple matter as much as human knowing is just as complex a process. Before we proceed, I'd like to share with you a quote from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And I quote, "The truth, Dumbledore sighed. It is a beautiful and terrible thing and should therefore be treated with great caution." At the end of the lesson, you are expected to distinguish the different ways of understanding truth and explain the criteria to establish the truth in an argument. Now share your thoughts among your group mates on the following real-life situation. A man who lives away from his family abroad has been in a state of coma, sustained by life support from medical equipment for about 2 months. Doctors have told his friends that he has very low chance of being revived if they take away the life support from him. It seems that they are left with no opinion or no other opinion but to pull the plug than to keep him in life support for years. As hospital regulations, it is only family members who are allowed to consent to pulling the plug. The man's brother finally arrived from his home country to give the consent. Something strange happened, however, the moment the brother started talking to the patient in coma. They noticed that his vital signs began to stabilize. Days passed and the patient started to show signs of rapid improvement. The doctors up to this day are unable to explain what had happened. Friends of the patient say the prayer of his community for a miracle was granted. Others say that the presence of his brother had a healing effect on him. Some doctors say that the medication must have worked in a way that has surprised the experts in the field. Today, the man has fully survived his condition and is as normal as he can be. Now my question, what do you think truly happened here? Note the differences in your opinion about the situation above. Who do you think is more correct? And what makes you think so? What is truth? What do we mean when we say that something is true? Many of us assume that truth is simple term with a singular meaning. Life in this world would be a lot simpler if truth only meant one thing. Life would have been a matter of simply answering the question whether the things we say, read about, and discuss are true or false. But just as reality is superabundantly rich, truth is just as rich. Unfortunately, very few of us really understand and appreciate its richness. If we examine the most respective truth that has been dominant in society, we would find that people mostly equate truth with scientific truth. We often say that something is true because it is based on facts. Furthermore, we say that something is factual when it is scientifically proven. That is, when it is backed by data gathering, analysis, and repeated verification. Try to pick up any magazine or newspaper that tries to argue that so and so is true. Most likely, the statements will look like this. A study from J. Ward Pitkin University shows that 95% of men and women who are taller than the average height are more likely to become successful and happy in their careers. Truth in this sense is related to science because it is in the field that delivers knowledge about the natural world. By natural, we mean here the totality of the physical realm, the biological world, matter, energy, and the human body, human actions, and the like. You may say that energy, atoms, and other similar things are not really physical objects, but they are concepts that are directly connected to them. As such, when science wants to explain the principles or conceptual connections behind them, they resort to objects in the physical world for their demonstration. When we say that something is true, we usually mean that the scientists mean. That is, verified in the natural world. Truth understood this way is what philosophers call objective truths. They point to description of states of affairs which remain true regardless of who is viewing them. Examples of these are the truths about the water cycle or the truth about the constant acceleration of free-falling body. Well, both examples point to be observable phenomena that remain constant and true. Whether or not it is a woman or a man, Japanese or a Filipino, a child or an adult viewing this phenomenon, the truths about them remain the same. Some scientists, however, point out that scientific truths are part of just one among the many ways of understanding truth. Unfortunately, not everyone is clearly aware of this. Let us take the case of people who condemn others for having a religion and for believing in God. These people argue that believers base their lives on unverified truths. Believers are judged to be irrational because they cannot demonstrate the truth of their faith. If we trace the line of reasoning, it will go as follows. Believers are irrational because they believe in things that they cannot be verified. So what this statement implies? Only those who believe in things that can be verified are rational. In other words, based on what has been said above so far, only those who believe in scientific truths are rational. Now, if we agree with this line of reasoning, then we also should agree that almost every one of us is irrational because many parts of our lives rest on things that we consider as true even if they are not scientifically proven. For example, as we grow into the world, we believe that some people love us even if there is no scientific basis for the truth of love. We believe that laws are written for the common good, even if there is no scientific way of defining what is good from what is evil. And for many of us, we believe that there is more to life than just working for our biological survival. We believe for the reason we hold true in our heart, the love of family, the good of service for others, or for the fulfillment of a responsibility. For many of us, these are the truths that matter because they define the direction of our human lives. Does this mean then that we are irrational? And if we are, does this mean that we are not human? Well, philosophy has been aware that the truth about truth remains to be a question for 1,000 years now. To narrowly confine to the scientific way of thinking is to claim that there is only one way of understanding truth. Jugar Habermas argues in his Universal Pragmatics, or the study of the structure of communicative language as we use it every day, that apart from the scientific truths, there are other domains in life in which we understand truth differently. First is the objective domain, or the scientific truths. It pertains to the natural world that maintains a relative independence from the perspective and attitude of human beings that perceive them. Another domain is the social domain, or the truth is analogous with, not the exact equivalent, a general agreement consensus on what is right as opposed to what is wrong. And the last domain is the personal domain, in which the truth is analogous with sincerity. Now, for the objective domain, this pertains to the natural world that maintains a relative independence from the perspective and attitude of human beings that perceive them. For example, typhoon season, which belongs to the natural realm, comes and goes whether or not we want it. Another example, the water's boiling point remains 100 degrees Celsius and will remain so even if a powerful tyrant wants to change it. Next, social domain. The truth is analogous with, not the exact equivalent, a general agreement or consensus on what is right as opposed to what is wrong. For example, in a chapel for prayer and meditation, we say that maintaining silence is good. But in a basketball game, we say that we should cheer for our team as loudly as we can to keep them motivated. We do not look at these two different situations as contradicting each other. We understand that some things are true or good in a particular context, while they are false or wrong in another context. The truths in social domain are mostly products of an agreement in society that has been established over time. Because of time-honored presence, they become so embedded in our society such that they are hardly questioned by anyone. It is in this way that norms or values appear as truths. Nevertheless, we have to be constantly aware that these truths are created or constructed by people. As such, they can be changed through a critical examination and deliberation among the members of a community. Aside from the social domain, there is also the personal domain, where truth is analogous with sincerity. When we say to another person, "I am telling the truth," what we usually mean by that statement is that our statements are consistent with our inner thoughts and intentions. This is a precarious domain of truth because no one can have access to our minds and our thoughts except ourselves. Even the one who claims to have psychic powers that can read your mind will have to rely on your own confirmation if she, in fact, reads you correct. For this reason, the truths that we claim in this domain need corresponding actions that will establish trust. A person who proves to be consistent with what he or she declares about himself or herself is regarded as authentic and can therefore be trusted or trustworthy. So when we ask, what is the truth? It is important to know from what domain we are asking this question. So we can also know in what way we can test whether or not a claim is true. For truth and justification. Richard Rorty offers a simple way of defining truth. Truth can be understood as what has passed procedures of justification, while justification means the process of proving the truth or validity of a statement. This process is made up of ways of critically testing a claim against certain criteria. As we have shown above, there are different domains of truth: objective, social, and personal. Now, each domain of truth has a corresponding justification or has different criteria for truth. In scientific or objective domain, truths are tested against empirical evidence, while for the social domain, truths are tested against their acceptability to a particular time in history. While for the personal domain, truths are tested against the consistency and authenticity of the person who claims it. A scientific statement is held as true when it is justified by data gathered from careful observation and analysis. Pharmaceutical companies convince doctors and patients on the effectiveness of their medicine by publishing research findings examined and critically analyzed by experts. Before a scientific journal gets published, it goes through a rigorous review process where experts raise critical questions that the researchers should be prepared to answer and defend with data. As soon as a scientific claim is no longer questioned or criticized, it is more or less gains the status of a scientific truth. In the language of Rorty, the claim of the scientist has passed the procedures of justification. The justification of social norms takes longer than scientific truths. This is especially true when who are involved in the process of justifying them are people coming from varying backgrounds and history. Because of their differences in their perspective, it is not easy to get a consensus or agreement. This is the reason why social norms take time before they are turned into hard laws. Furthermore, even if they do become laws, there is always the impending possibility of them being revoked or changed. This is because norms that have become laws for a particular generation may no longer be true for another generation. Despite the difficulty of gaining a consensus, however, this does not discount the possibility that we can talk about social truth. No matter how painful the process of justification may be, or no matter how long it takes, we cannot simply resort to the easy way out by saying that anything goes. Social norms, turned to social truths, are the basis for the balance in our society. Without them, society will be no different from a jungle in which only the strong and powerful survive. The justification of personal truth is probably the longest to complete among the three. This is because personal truths take a whole lifetime of consistency in the actions and decisions of a person who make a claim about himself. For example, when someone says, "I love you" to his girlfriend, or would one know that this is true? One action for gifts or a year of dating her would not be enough. True love, as the adage goes, is tested by time. A boyfriend can be said to to be insincere or inauthentic when he only shows his love for a few days and acts differently after he has been sexually satisfied. For this reason, believing in someone's sincerity takes years of hard work. For the philosophers Jean-Jacques Rousseau, it is important that a declaration of conversion must be declared publicly. In this way, the resolve to break away from a person's past inner life will have to be constantly proven and guaranteed through one's actions from the point of conversion onwards. To sum it up, despite the many ways by which we can understand truth, there is a common definition among them of what truth is, that it has surpassed its test of justification. To answer the question, what is truth, we must first determine which domain of truth the assertion belongs to. Then, apply the corresponding criteria of justifying the truth of such assertion. If we are clear about what makes a statement true, we can easily distinguish it from a mere opinion. Now, I want you to answer the following. First, I want you to plot the main points in the discussion on a table. You follow the given table. The first column are your domains of truth. The second column is you will give examples of each domain. And the last column, the procedure of justification for each domain. Another activity that you will answer: to which domain of truth does each of the following statement fall? Then explain your answer. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. So, what or which domain of truth does this statement belong? Reptiles are cold-blooded. Do not talk when your mouth is full. Another situation: death penalty is acceptable in some countries, while it is forbidden in other countries. Now, how do you explain the difference in acceptability of death penalty? Why do some groups or cultures allow it while others do not? Next, Western medicine has a tendency to be dismissive when it comes to other forms of medicine like India's Ayurveda, China's acupuncture, or even traditional Filipino health remedies. Is that fair judgment? Justify your answer. To check your understanding, I want you to answer the following. Differentiate the following: objective versus non-objective truth, and differentiate truth in the social domain versus truth in the personal domain. Next, what are the criteria or the test of justification to establish truth in the social domains of truth? We have here scientific domain, in the social domain, and personal domain. And that's all for our discussion. Thank you. See you next meeting. Goodbye.
Mga kadasig, do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell button for notifications and like this video. Daghang salamat!